have an announcement for you guys. Seth and we talked about this just before. We are doing ads, as you know, but turns out that our ad people, the Spreaker people, their platform plays nicely with Patreon. So we can publish episodes without ads to Patreon behind a certain tier. So if you are a $5 or more Patreon, that's an option. If you're not digging the ads, you're definitely gonna, skew our download numbers a little bit. You're gonna make us do math if you do that, which is mean, and you shouldn't because math is mean. But, direct subscription to the content creators versus the syndicated ad content, that is a way to engage with the model. So that is something I'm going to be adding to new episodes as we go forward. Doing the backlog is going to be someday in the future, because that's going to be a process. But I'll be doing that with episodes going forward. So if you want to avoid ads, then become a $5 or more Patreon on our Patreon, and then you can get the files there.
So yeah, just trying to make sure everybody has a way to continue to enjoy the podcast going forward.
Yeah, trying to, make this multi-optioned and fair to everyone while also attempting to make our hourly pay for this gig slightly more profitable. Just slightly. I recognize that this is not meant to be a day job, but doesn't mean I can't try.
And yet, someday, perhaps.
It would be cool. I'm trying to have lots of irons in the fire right now, so I'm excited to have the opportunity to try ads, because Patreon has pretty much gone as far as it's going to go. But we have now found a new way to make Patreon part of the thing, because Spreaker is smart and plays nicely with other things like Patreon. So those things will all be linked together, and that's going to be spiffy. So there you go. Heads up. I'll probably put that heads up in a bunch of episodes, but here's the first one.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Are you ready to talk about Chapter 26, the extra bit?
I am. I feel like the only other preamble I have are things I don't want to talk about. So yes, I am very ready to get into this absolutely, what was I calling it? Quaternary level character-filled chapter. Yes. Yeah. Chapter 26, the extra bit.
It's got some Logain in it, which is some people's favorite.
But that's right at the end. Most of it is Aes Sedai you've either never heard of or have definitely forgotten about, even though you did technically hear about them once.
Hey, now, I feel like there's a couple of name drops in this one. But yeah, you're right. It's, we were describing it as a mixed nut bowl. trail mix. Yeah.
Name trail mix, because it's not quite as blurry as a name salad. But I will say I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 tabs from Wiki open on different characters that we need to talk about, at least briefly. So there's a lot of stuff I couldn't remember, shall we say.
I'm hoping to click on the name as it pops up and then close that window. So I've got the chapter summary open, but I'm depending on that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because you go digital, and I'm still being a Luddite over here and using an actual book like a weirdo. But yeah, this is the chapter in which the Black Ajah hunters find the ferrets and get found out by the sitters and notice that Tovaine is a little sus. Also, the chapter in which Logain captures Tovaine.
Did we have any corrections from last week?
Oh, yeah. Charmy in the chat was pointing out. Okay, so Charmy says, I think you have the Ajah head meeting things backwards. The sitters who came to investigate Seaine and Pevara aren't ordered to do so by the Ajah heads. They snoop around because they know the Ajah heads must be up to something and they want to know why. Tovaine is trying to figure out what the Ajah heads are up to, probably because of Black Ajah orders, but I don't think the Ajah heads are aware this is happening. And having read this chapter, I would agree with that paragraph.
Okay.
Yeah, then there's a conversation that we had after that in the channel, but that, I believe, is the correction, and this chapter is the justification for that correction.
That's a great way to break into it.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for contributing to the conversations in our Discord. I know that it's not quite as active as it used to be, maybe, but goddamn, do we still rely on the Discord as much as ever. Ever since I first showed up and it was an empty, echoing place and we built it, it has always been a critical part of this podcast. And I don't see that ever changing. We need the Discord.
And we love you very much. To quote a certain
Yes, unlike Tarvalon After Dark, we will not tell you to
No, we will not. I always think that's so rude. And I'm like, do you want me to cut that? They're like, no, we love it. I'm like, okay.
It's a bit. It's a bit. Bits are a thing.
Yeah, it is their thing, but they're very funny.
They are so funny. And we should also point out that our chapter symbol is the Dark Friend Fang for reasons that are obvious. We have actual Dark Friends and we have the Ashaman who are, notated by or denoted by black by the Fang. All of that.
And this is chapter 26, the extra bit, and the symbol is the Dragon's Fang.
Seaine strode the hallways of the tower with a growing sense of being confounded at every turn. The White Tower was quite large, true, but she had been at this for hours. She very much wanted to be snug in her own rooms. Despite casements in place in every window, drafts drifted along the broad, tapestry-hung corridors and made the stand lamps flicker. Cold drafts, and difficult to ignore when they slipped under her skirts. Her rooms were warm and comfortable and safe. Maids bobbed curtsies and manservants bowed in her wake, half seen and completely ignored. Most sisters were in their own Ajah's quarters, and those few out and about moved with wary pride, often in pairs, always of the same Ajah, shawls spread along their arms and displayed like banners. She smiled and nodded pleasantly to Tovaine, but the statuesque, golden-haired sitter returned a hard stare, beauty carved from ice, then stalked away, twitching her green-fringed shawl. Too late now to approach Tovaine about being part of the search, even had Pevara been agreeable. Pevara counseled caution, then more caution, and truth to tell, Seaine was more than willing to listen under the circumstances. It was just that Tovaine was a friend. Had been a friend.
Tovaine, Black Ajah alert.
Oh, they got so close to disaster.
So close. Right there. She's like, too late now to approach her about being part of the search, even had Pevara been agreeable. Like, yes, you came that close to going to a dark friend to help you search for dark friends. That close.
The hair's breadth. If she had chosen to lean over Pevara based on one childhood incident going a slightly different way. Like, it's just the breath of a butterfly's wing, right?
Or a Taviran's pull.
Or a Taviran's pull. It's everything says that she should have, this whole thing could have been exposed to the Black Ajah. Like, yeah, shrieking.
A few of these other brown sisters and white sisters, not sure how much you wanted to go into detail about who they were with the open tabs.
All right, quaternary character,
right.
Let's go.
Shall we eat that nut and fruit mixture?
Yes, let's get our trail mix out and just start with the farthest left of the tabs I have open in this window.
Shall we look for the piece of chocolate in among the trail mix?
Yes, exactly. So we're walking through the hallways because she is looking for one Aes Sedai in particular, but she sees a whole bunch of others along the way and thinks about the dynamics in the tower. And several of them are showing her disdain. So the first one is Julianne Madome. She is a sitter for the Brown Ajah. She's a loyalist.
She's one of the two young sitters.
Yes.
So she's really too young to be one, and it's expected that when they come back together, the two halves of the tower come back together, she will resign. That's one of the reasons she was elevated to that position. That is not, however, how it works.
Yeah, no, she's one of the ones that does not survive the reemerging. Mm-hmm. And she's assumed dead at the end of the books. It's not known for sure, but she's assumed dead. The next one is Saerin Asnobar, who, unlike Julianne Madome, who means absolutely nothing and doesn't do anything interesting at all, Saerin has a huge bang to make in this chapter and stays extremely relevant for the rest of the series. And we're going to talk about her so many times. We don't even need to get into her right now because she's an actual tertiary character. She's up and above the quaternary level of most of the characters in this chapter.
And just one more time, fuck you, Robert Jordan. Saerin and Seaine in the same chapter is two of the most important Aes Sedai in it. I am honestly quite angry right now, Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, it's, how dare you? How fucking dare you, RJ? How dare you? We love you, but how dare you?
What, did you think people would never talk about this series? Good God.
Yeah, did you think people would not be nitpicking it for more hours than it takes the audiobooks to deliver them to their ears? Did you not anticipate that? Really?
I saw a meme today that the question is not if Robert Jordan is trolling me, but how is Robert Jordan trolling me?
I'm nodding.
And
I am nodding.
yeah, I think he does this shit on purpose.
Absolutely. And so those are the first two that we see in the hallway. And then there's a couple of lines I wanted to read that I think really bears on our discussion last chapter about Elaida. A great pity the hall could not obstruct Elaida's mad decree, but first one Ajah, then another, had leaped on the new prerogatives. Few sisters were willing to think of giving them up now they were in place, and the result was a tower divided very nearly into armed camps. So we were talking before about how it's strange that Elaida acts like she doubles down, but in a sense, she's following the lead from the bottom. It's so entrenched that she has no choice but to double down, at least the way that Seaine sees it.
Well, it's a feedback loop, right? And she's stuck in the middle of it. It was started by the Black Ajah, forcing her to pass decrees that split up the Ajahs. The Ajahs seized onto it, which then caused more division. And then you get this feedback loop where she's stuck passing decrees to make people feel safe. And then they latch onto them and use them to attack each other.
The Overton window has shifted really radically to the more paranoid side.
Right.
And now it's going to be hard to move back.
Mm-hmm. Without some sort of disruption in the tower. Some sort of Sean Chan attack.
Yeah. Just throw a lamp on the ground and shatter that oil everywhere and see what happens. Yeah. And then the next one that we get to talk about is Zara Dakan, who is ostensibly the focal point of the opening of this chapter. This is the woman that Seaine is looking for. And the first of the 10 ferrets, spies, propagandists that were sent from the rebels. And the reason that she gets caught is because she obfuscated her trail because she came from the rebels, and that's a whole thing. She's not actually very interesting. She never gets mentioned again after this. I mean, she gets mentioned in passing like once, but she actually only shows up in this chapter, I think. Right. So she's really a red herring in terms of important characters.
Because, as we said, the trick is Tovaine, because she's the first dark friend they end up catching. She's the end of that thread that they're able to start pulling on. The realization that, yes, the Black Ajah is real. We have captured one. And those of us who have taken this oath are not, and we've proven that, and we now have a way to search out more.
Right. Tovaine gets presented and gone by, and then we get this false lead, but it does end up circling back to Tovaine in the end. So very masterful. He might be terrible with trolling us about names, but masterful dropping of characters in a braided pattern of who's who, who's meaningful.
There's also this line here. Rumor said a sitter, had more than her dignity ruffled by the Reds, though not who. I believe that turns out to be Doacine.
Yes.
Later on. We learn about that later on in the chapter. But if you're wondering at this point, that's who it is.
Yep. She strayed too far into Red territory and presumably was beaten up. That was what the wiki implied, but we don't actually know. The Reds being the Reds, we should probably assume it was just being kicked and punched. So what happens is Seaine says, I need you for something. Please follow me down into the basement. And Zara says, this is logically a fine thing to do. Of course.
Right, yes.
Because they're both whites.
Right.
So the whole thing is framed in terms of logic. It's really fun being, in case anyone forgot, Seaine is a white. It's really fun being in the head of a white and having everything framed, well, logically. And then she's also dealing with like physical anxiety and terror that she knows isn't logical, but it's only a small part of her mind that knows that. And that returns with her again and again. But I like being in her head. She's a really, really likable character for all that she's a white, you know?
Meanwhile, I'm in the back going, don't go into that basement. Are you kidding me? This is how people die. Like, seriously. Oh, follow me into this dank, dusty basement where nobody ever goes. Just you and me, and I'm gonna go, why don't you go first? Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna come, it's like, oh my god, can you please not? Like, this is something that could be a real horror aspect, if you think about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I hate the genre because I'm always like, you are being so illogical. Stop going alone into the room that keeps killing people. Like, stop. Like, I can't with the genre. So, yes, I agree. This has strong overtones of that because I'm always like, Zara, have you ever been in the world at all? Why are you like this? But the Aes Sedai power structures, you trust the people set over you. You trust the people that are more powerful than you. You're brainwashed into never questioning anything ever because I guess it makes sense. But, oof.
So how do you think they got furniture down there?
I'm assuming that they carried it and like used weaves of power to like make it lighter, but we're still like huffing and puffing their way down the hallways, like absolute physical comedy, like nonsense. Or maybe they were like just like holding their hands under it and using the power to like support their hands. So like they weren't actually holding it. Just like, whatever. It's fine. I don't know. I can't imagine it was anything less than comical.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where like furniture is always there in these scenes, but Jordan made you want to stop for a minute and think about like, well, how does that furniture get there? They can't trust the servants. They must have had to do it themselves, right? And then picture like, wait, these stuffy old women carrying like a chair down the hallway, like I don't know. I just imagine he's like making a little joke and a little like stop for a minute and think about how all the stuff gets where it gets in these fantasy scenes.
Yeah, imagine these women who haven't carried a chair since they were like 8 years old.
Right.
Trying to like negotiate an actual table down like a
pivot.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, it's funny. You can't, and because they're old friends, they're like bickering, and like one of them breaks a nail, and like it's just a whole thing. Like there's an entire like comedic sequence in the middle of this very tense arc. Right. And so they go below, even where the accepted are tested. They are down into parts of the tower that haven't been utilized in decades, if not centuries. Seaine's pretty sure it's been at least a century since they were in this room. And for some reason, Pevara is just sitting in the room in the dark and like doesn't have a light on.
Talk about this is equivalent to Moraine's like dramatic entrance in the TV show. And this is Moraine, and this is Pevara.
It's so campy. It's so campy.
Yeah. Click.
It's beautiful, but it's so campy.
It's very CIA. It's very much like click, and then she like leans forward.
Yeah. It's so dumb. It's like, Pevara, really, you have the nerves to sit here in the dark just listening for footsteps coming down the hall for like however many hours? Like, what? Are you? It makes no sense. It's so comedic.
It's one of the reasons I love Pevara, especially early on Pevara, right? Like everyone loves them after she gets together with Andral and they're awesome, right? But like even early Pevara has a real sense of drama and like straightforwardness and just like doesn't deal with anybody's bullshit. And her like response is, well, yeah, my family was killed by dark friends. Shut up and let's do this.
Mm-hmm. I always loved Pevara, like from the jump. Pevara was one of my favorite characters. I was so excited when I saw that that Sanderson was running with her character in particular. I was like, yes, because RJ makes her so funny and so dramatic and so serious all at the same time. So drama aside, they get in the room, the lights go on. We're having our CIA interrogation moment.
She pulls out the lie detector. The oath rod.
Yeah. And Zara gives away the jump immediately because she goes like, because Pevara says, we want to know if you're a dark friend. And she goes, well, the Reds are full of dark friends. And it's just like, oh, that's where these rumors have been coming from. Like she gives it away right away. She gives away that she's the source of these rumors. Granted, she's one of 10, but still, she's such an immature Aes Sedai. That impulsiveness. She gave away so much with that.
You Reds have been setting up the false dragons for years, if you ask me. There's no need to look further than the Red Quarters to find Black Sisters. So, yeah, that's exactly the rumor she was sent to spread. And that's the lie that Seaine created that's being spread.
Yeah, and that's the lie that she believes so strongly that she almost dies until Pevara allows her to not lie. Which happens in this chapter, and we'll talk about when we get there.
But at the same time, we see Tovaine having been punished for some things the Red Ajah did.
And, like, curse the people who claimed the Black Ajah was involved.
Right.
Like, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. She very well may have been doing these things.
Mm-hmm. Without being Black Ajah, right? So the accusation here is right for the wrong reasons, right? If we assume that Tovaine's perspective is helpful in that regard, then this lie is not a lie, except that it thinks it's a lie, except that people believe it, but they're believing for the wrong. It's so messy. So messy. But yes, lie detector gets brought out, and we get a brief little vignette about Sarayla Bagand. Is another important character in terms of... so Sarayla Bagand is a Amerlin who started out as a white sitter and ended up getting moved into being the mistress of novices for 107 years, which was an incredibly long time to keep someone in that position. And according to the wiki, probably from the companion, take that as you will, that it was rumored she was kept as the mistress of novices to keep her out of the hall because she was such a forceful personality. She does not like Cadsuane. She's a fairly contemporary figure. Her and Cadsuane were contemporaries. And they did not like each other. There's an incident where there's a conspiracy to put Cadsuane on the Amerlin seat, and she drags them to Sarayla, who is Amerlin at the time, and gives them to her for punishment. It's a whole part of Cadsuane's backstory. And when Sarayla died, Cadsuane left the tower for 10 years to avoid being made Amerlin. So Sarayla Bagand, she's part ancient history and part very much a part of understanding recent Amerlin politics and how Cadsuane fits into the Aes Sedai mythos.
That's what happens when you have people who live for 300 years. You can have things that are both ancient history and only a generation back.
Yeah, I mean, and for the Ogier, that's normal. For humans, there's only this one special class, but yeah. So yeah, Seaine has PTSD around Sarayla, which is irrational, but no less real. Because minds are like that.
So they demand her to swear the 3 oaths, and that you'll swear to obey the 2 of us absolutely.
The 4th oath. Dun, dun, dun.
Which, again, is never a good idea. It's compulsion.
It's such a bad idea. Such a bad idea. And Egwene nips that shit out the second she hears about it. Like, as I recall, she wastes no time on expending all of her social capital on making that stop.
Right, immediately.
And it's a good investment on her part, but she does not let it stand. As Amberlin, she is like, that is pretty much the worst thing you could do. So stop.
You've already affirmed they're not dark friends. That's enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Forcing people through the dark friend verification process, fine. Fuck ethics for that one moment. But like moving forward, you can't be compelling people to obedience.
That's just Sean Chan all over again.
It's a collar without a collar. Absolutely. It's not okay. Free will is one of the most important things magic users are supposed to leave alone. You find that in real magic. You find that in myth magic. You find that in fantasy that pretends to not be based in myths. Like that's a hard line. Free will is not to be fucked with.
Again, bringing it back to the Lycanus trilogy, because that's what I've been reading. Haha. There is a whole arc in the 3rd book where basically one of our characters gets compulsion abilities over a certain group of people. And he has to figure out how to use that in a helpful way. And he does things like basically by being a one-man communication post, right? Or like giving, he's the general, so he gives out orders, but they're not like, they sort of agree to be their pieces. And there's one scene, not, spoilers here, folks, where he like, basically they're all in a, That
is arguably an ethical way to use that power.
Right, yeah. So it's an interesting,
interesting
look on that book again, to plug it for a umpteenth time. I think I should stop now until he starts giving me some royalties.
Free plugs are a good thing, maybe.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I'm just kidding.
They talk a little bit about the logic of why they're using the oath rod this way and the fact that you can release yourself from oaths and how that works. There's a discussion about that, just that you can free yourself, basically. She does not mention how painful it is to free yourself from the oaths. She just says it's possible. She leaves that it feels like having your entire skin ripped off like a Band-Aid. She leaves that out.
Yeah, I mean, when we hear about it tightening down around them, it touches every part of their skin. So just imagine that, going from a bandage, in reverse, just having a Band-Aid ripped off every inch of your skin. It's a reverse facelift.
Does not sound pleasant at all. Though she does say that it was strangely exhilarating to claim that Pevara had a beard or that the streets are paved with cheese, which it's again, there's a lot of comedy in what I can imagine Pevara and Seaine's adventures have been like, because they were in their rooms, like still wiping away the tears of pain and then trying out the ability to lie and just saying the most ridiculous nonsense and just giggling and being like girls again, even though they're in the middle of this deadly serious hunt and they're grown women. They're also like, the streets are made of cheese. Like, it's a cute scene to imagine.
Well, see, the next thing I have is they get the fact that she's from Saladar out of her, just because they have the oath to obey. And so she can't hide her secrets anymore. She's a ferret. They find it out.
Yeah. And that means she's giving up 9 other people.
Right.
Immediately. Like the whole thing is unveiled in one fell swoop. Seaine is disappointed and relieved at the same time that she's not a dark friend, because it's a false lead.
Yeah.
Like they went through all that effort, weeks of time. So that also gives us a bit of a sense of what the timeline is like, right? Even though things are happening fast, this is a plot line that's been going for weeks. Just we weren't checking in with it.
Oh no, whole weeks go by in the wheel of time. Whatever
it's
it will
very
be.
Strange.
It's been a while since that's happened.
Yeah. But yeah, they just use botanical forensics to work out that she's obfuscating where she came from, and the whole thing comes out. It's quite simple. And then we get the conflicting oaths, which is, again, just logic, right? And compelling people. It's bad. So basically, Pevara says, you have to renounce the lie and you have to obey me. But in Zara's mind, the lie isn't a lie. So she's being commanded to do something she's commanded to been incapable of doing, starts to suffocate, and Pevara has to release her before she literally dies.
Right, because she can't tell a lie because she's Aes Sedai, and then she say something that she thinks is a lie.
Yeah, she's ordering her to lie when she is magically incapable of lying. Because it's not about truth. The oaths don't allow you to discover truth. They allow you to discover belief. Right.
That is definitely a flaw in the oath, right? Because it's not the kind of magic system where there's a universal truth and no matter what you think, you're bound to it. It's very, very much in your perception of what you think that oath means.
Yeah, it's a big flaw. It'd be cool if you could make an oath that was, tell me the objective truth. You could learn so much science just by querying someone.
Yeah. It's like having a compass that points to the truth.
And a lithiometer, one might say.
Yes. Damn it, someone's already always ahead of us.
Yeah, totally.
I love how bitter Pevara is. She's fine, girl.
You don't have to lie. Yeah. Because she has to be convinced, she hasn't been tried yet. You can't be judge, jury, and executioner. And it's like, okay, fine. Doesn't matter what I believe. I can admit that this person should not die right now. So, but yes, her grudgingness is great.
And then they sort of stumble on the idea of conflicting oaths, which I do think are a problem. And I thought this would be a good time to review the Dark Friend oaths.
Oh, yes.
Number 1, I shall obey all commands given by those placed above me in service to the Great Lord. Rank matters. 2, it is a pyramid scheme. 2, I shall prepare for the day of the Great Lord's return. Okay, preppers, I guess. And number 3, I shall hold close the secrets of the Black Ajah unto the hour of my death, which, as we know, has very specific consequences for a certain V name.
Varen, rest in knowledge. So, how would you make that conflict with an oath of obedience? You would, if you told someone to tell you secrets about the thing.
Yeah, or don't obey orders.
Right. That would create a conflicting oath, and you would end up with the person dropping dead.
If say if you says something like don't obey anything the Forsaken tell you to do, and the Forsaken come in and be like, go that way, you'd rip yourself in half.
Right, or like disobey this person if they give you a Dark Friend order or something like that, or just I command you to tell me who you report to.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like,
they physically can't say it.
Yeah. It's unlikely that that's come up very often in the Tower history, but I bet this isn't the first time.
No.
And so then they move on to what to do with Zera next, which is that a sister sworn to obey could be compelled, induced, to help in the hunt, so long as you did not mind forcing her to accept the danger, whether she wished to or not.
I like the way she changes the verbiage from compelled to induced.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wait, no, I don't want to say compelled. Induced. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, you changed the word. Good job, thesaurus. So helpful. Yeah. I do like that she wants that internal consistency with her own moral compass and sidesteps it a little bit.
Find out that the ferrets, there's 2 from each Ajah except the red and the blue. The red, obviously, because there's no rebels for them to send who are red, because all the red stayed. And the blue can't sneak in because there's no blue Ajah left.
Right. And they pick out the next one to bring to them so that they can repeat this process with the next one. And that is Bernile, who is no one of note and is presumed alive at the end. There's nothing interesting about her.
Just the other white in that group.
Yeah. So they send her off to do that. And there's this great thought where she says, "You are being recruited into a worthier cause than your misguided rebellion, Zera." And then in her head, she thinks, of course it was misguided. No matter how mad with power Elida had become. Like, you're really telling yourself that a lot to go to sleep at night, Seaine. Maybe sit with that.
Self-justification.
Yeah. And Zera hates it, but she literally has to do it, and it sucks. And Seaine and Pevara are left alone for like 45 seconds to talk it out before the rest come in. And I don't really know if there's much to talk about there. It's just, are we being sneaky enough? We don't have to be sneaky. Nobody cares about anything. Seaine had always admired the other woman's strength of will, but really sometimes it was just pure stubbornness. We're just talking about the ferrets, just arguing about it. And then Saerin, Tovaine, Yukiri, and Doacine walk in.
That's like the final 4, right? I mean, these are some of the most powerful, most important Tower Aes Sedai at this point in the Tower themselves.
Right. They are sitters, not heads of Ajahs, but they are sitters who are attempting to figure out what's really going on in the tower and do something about it. They think the Ajah heads are doing stuff that they don't approve of. They think Seaine and Pevara are doing stuff they don't approve of. They're just trying to get all up in the everything, these 4 sitters. But yes, they are perhaps the most actually powerful independent Aes Sedai in the tower at this point.
And what I think is so funny is Tovaine is the one who keeps urging them on to find out what's going on. Mm-hmm. She's the one.
Right until the Oath Rod gets involved. And then suddenly she's like, it's like, first she's like, you aren't leaving until we know. Oh, the Oath Rod's here? Yeah, I'm leaving. I'm out. It's just her mood changes.
Hung on your own petard.
Yes, for sure. So yeah, Saerin is cool. She was raised from the Daughters of Silence.
Yeah.
That's her cool backstory thing.
The only one
of the Daughter of Silence to make it to the Shawl. She's really cool. She's a brown and she's really sharp and takes no shit and kicks ass. I like her a lot. And she is early on supportive of Egwene in terms of respecting her and seeing her as an Aes Sedai and speaking up for her eventually. Tovaine is obviously a dark friend. That's basically what's interesting about her. Yukiri is a gray, and I really like her also. She's tiny.
I was going to say, Yukiri's one of those ones, I think it might just be because of the uniqueness of her name that I find her compelling, because I remember her every time, but she sort of pops up and is always doing the right thing.
Yeah, and she's really stubborn and really going her own way. So she's like often the voice of opposition in conversations and gives good arguments. So yeah, she's got a distinctive name and she's often pushing back against the Aes Sedai being stupid. So it's easy to like her.
Exactly.
And then we've also got Doacine, who is the one that swears a whole bunch. She's a yellow that swears a whole bunch. That's kind of her distinguishing feature. I think she shows up a lot in Egwene's arc. These 4, well, not Tovaine, but the 3 that are not Dark Friends show up a lot in Egwene's tower arc repeatedly. And with all of them in the room, if you include Tovaine for the moment, you have one powerful Aes Sedai representative from each Ajah, aside from the red and the blue in here. But instead of the green, we actually have a black sister. So, you know, we're down to 4 good. Ajah representative is getting real slim pickings down here.
Well, I mean, it's better than it was up in the hall with Elida, where 3 out of 6 were black.
True. This is 1 out of 6. Mm-hmm. And then we learned that it was Doacine that got too close to the red quarters. It's just a passing comment. And then about Saerin being from the Daughters of Silence. And we get a sense of who these 4 women are. They're all rebels in a way, and Elida had humiliated everyone. So Seine's just thinking through who they are and why they're here. That's why we're getting all this exposition, is because we have a white who's freaking out. So we're getting a tabulation of facts. And then Tovaine steps forward and bursts all of her logical deductions to flinders because she's working on Black Ajah orders, and those don't follow logic.
Yeah, and she's just demanding these answers because she's black and she's been told to figure out what's going on, right?
Yeah, so this is... Yukiri noticed you 2 sneaking about together, and we want to know why. Did the heads of your Ajah set you a secret task? In public, the Ajah heads snarl at one another worse than anyone else, but they've been sneaking off into corners to talk, it seems. Whatever they're scheming, the Hall has a right to know. So Tovaine, for some reason, ties these 2 separate things together. I don't know why. Because Yukiri rebuts that, right? Because that starts out with it saying, Yukiri noticed you 2 sneaking around together. And Yukiri says, no, I pointed out they were sneaking together when you pointed out that a bunch of Aes Sedai were sneaking together. It gets really catty and gossipy. And I think that's why it's hard to follow. Because she thinks, well, maybe they're just pillow friends, like whatever, that's just your business. I held my tongue till Tovaine here started yelping about who's been huddling in corners. Sometimes 6 and 6 make a dozen, and sometimes they make a mess. So tell us if you can, the Hall does have a right. So it makes no sense to me why these 2 sneaking around and the Ajah head sneaking around have been tied together for this quartet. Why is this quartet a thing?
I don't have an answer for that.
It's like they're the leaders of the Hall.
Right.
Like they're not the heads of the Ajahs, and the Hall doesn't have like minority and majority leaders, but it appears that they functionally do. They don't have the title for it, but maybe they functionally do.
Right, because every Ajah is supposed to have a group of 3, right? And this is one of those 3. But there's not one that's superior to any others. But what I would think is each Ajah has sent a representative.
To do what?
To figure out what's going on between these Ajahs.
Right, so who's sending them?
It's
at some point, there's women who are going kind of rogue, but they're also working with other women who are going rogue.
Right. Well, I think it's just like they end up talking, and they like, because they meet in a group, maybe they end up, I don't know why this particular group of 4 got together. I have no clue.
Yeah, this is why these plots are so hard to untangle, is because this is the actual critical question, is why are these 4 together, and why are these 2 Aes Sedai and the heads of the Ajahs being tied together as business the Hall has a right to know in the same way? Like that, I don't think gets explained. Maybe it's just a book club. Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe it's just a knitting circle. It's a podcast group, it's as I said I do in their off time. Stitch and bitch, yeah.
But I look at Congress and I'm like, why the hell did those two senators get together and pass legislation? And I feel like this is the same thing where you're like, maybe just politics, the shifting alliances. A group came together for some unrelated reason and decided to fix this problem. Unsure.
Yeah, it's. I don't think that there is an answer that ever gets given canonically, and I challenge our audience to come up with a coherent explanation.
Swingers? I don't know.
Yeah, chat is coming up with an ever increasingly wild series of suggestions. Behind the scenes love of fried chicken, Hello Friends, secret anime watch club. There's a lot of good suggestions, but no good answers, I don't think. I mean, these are all good answers, but I don't think, So, yeah, they kind of go back and forth for a minute, and then Saerin gets all white Ajah. She's a white, right?
Brown.
No, she's a brown. What am I saying? I was just saying how great she is for being a brown. She says, I enjoy puzzles, and grabs the oath rod and immediately swears on it that she will speak no word that is not true and is not a dark friend, and then looks at them and says, did I solve the puzzle?
Yeah. Great
so
moment.
Good.
Great moment. It is a very white moment. You're right. Despite being a brown, it's like puzzles really are white Ajah things. But she as a brown is the one who, picks it apart and solves it.
Yeah, and blues have a puzzle element as well. I mean, puzzles are a common thing, but it's just the deduction is so white of her. Mm-hmm. They start passing the rod around. And it's not a dildo. They're passing around in a very not dildo way, to refer back to the show. This is distinctly not a bunch of women passing a dildo around. Uh-huh. And they each swear that they're black.
What was that swingers comment I said earlier?
The dildo of truth. Yes.
Oh, Jesus.
That's terrible. And then Tovaine gets more and more agitated as each successive woman swears the oath. Tovaine is getting more agitated and edging towards the door. And then Saerin grabs her belt knife as the others tell Tovaine she's not leaving until she swears. It's like they cut off here and I don't think pick up until next book, but it's just like Saerin is about to stab Tovaine if she tries to leave. It's amazing.
I mean, she's basically self-admitted to being a dark friend, right? That's what it means if you won't take that oath when everybody else will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, at that point, I think the audience, everyone knows.
Shit, we got one.
Yeah.
Yeah, not only did you solve the puzzle, you flushed one out. Good job.
Yeah. This whole thing was about to be a wild goose chase, and then thanks to Saerin adding herself to the situation, they actually managed to catch their quarry for real. It's quite satisfying, I think.
Yeah, no, it's so satisfying. They pull the thread. They get to start picking at the Black Ajah, and they don't get very far before Gawain, gets the motherload of all information dumps dropped in her lap. Like, the thing you have to understand is this whole quest is to do what Varen has already done, to track down and find the Black Ajah and figure out who is black and who is not. Varen's done it. It's in her little book. She's ready to dump that on Egwene's lap.
Yeah, 70 years of work begun to be recreated in a matter of a few weeks, which if you stack multiple people working on it, it's more like 7 weeks, say, as opposed to 7 decades. And they get one.
Yeah.
And where Varen has 80-something% of the thing mapped out.
At least.
And perspective shift.
Tovaine, yeah, because she got sent off at horse speed when we have been jumping around this world at gateway speed.
Yes.
So she has been approaching the Black Tower for quite some time and doing it slowly because her party is split up into lots of groups and are trying not to be noticed and weaving in and out throughout all of this space as discretionarily as they can. And they completely fail.
Everybody knows that there's a bunch of Aes Sedai creeping through the Andorian countryside. Literally everybody. And,
it's pretty obvious since Logain takes Tovaine second, he's captured at least one more of her groups already.
Yeah. Yeah. It's ridiculous how much the Red Sisters underestimate their way into a complete like bloodless TBK almost.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and what's great about it is it's almost because it took them so long to get there. Right, in the time between when they left the White Tower, when they may have had a chance at taking down the 30 or 50 slightly untrained Ashaman, in those months in between when they were traveling, he traveled, gained 1,000 times as many followers, and trained them all up to be pretty badass because he was pushing it, you know?
Right. When she left, had Dumai's Wells happened?
I don't think that's tough. I would have to go back and look at timelines on that one.
I think she either leaves around when Dumai's Wells is happening or before. So the Black Tower was very, very different when she left the White Tower than it is now that she's approaching the gate. Oh, I had never really quite thought about the fact that if she'd had gateways, it would have been closer to a one-on-one fight.
Right.
Yeah, that's the tyranny of distance.
But even so, I mean, they blunder right in. I mean, there's 4 of them, and they get surrounded by at least 15 men who can channel.
Yeah, and she has the guards not wearing their armor, which was a detail I had never noticed before. But doing my notes, it was like, none of the men liked it that their armor was stowed away. And they watch the forest like there's going to be an attack at any moment. And then she immediately sacrifices all of them to get away for the Aes Sedai. Like, she made them go into this conflict without their armor on because she was so overconfident. Like, yeah, she would have fucked this up no matter how quickly she got to the Black Tower.
Well, and she's got an interesting history that we get here. The whole...
Yes.
She did some bad stuff. She was part of the foulness, as Codswain calls it 20 years ago.
The vileness.
The vileness, yes. Which was essentially the Black Ajah inducing the Red Ajah to hunt down boys who can channel.
Well, young men who can channel, because it had to be manifesting.
That's a good point.
Ability.
Yes, that's true.
But I think also luck, right? We see that in New Spring. If they're lucky or any sign of channeling.
Yeah. Well, I think lucky is just a sign of channeling that they tune into.
Right. But they get a little overzealous and kill people that are simply lucky.
Yeah, absolutely.
And haven't started channeling at all. Like, right. It's a pogrom against male channelers, but it sweeps up a lot of non-channelers.
Including Tom's nephew, Owen.
Who is a channeler, but...
Who's a channeler, yes. He is gentled without trial.
Right. Because it's a pogrom, not the White Tower doing its normal legal business. Because, as you said, this is the Red Ajah being directed by the Black.
Right.
What had been done those 20 years ago was necessary, and the light burned all those who muttered that the Black Ajah must have been involved. Tovaine Gazal is a horrible, horrible, horrible person that is absolutely going to the Ranland equivalent of hell for her actions. She's not a good person. And yet, she would never in a million years choose to be a Darkfriend. She has to be forcibly turned. And she thinks here that, no, that's what the Reds do. She is committed to her beliefs.
Is that her fate? Is she forcibly turned?
Yes. Yes, she is. It's, again, one of the slight redeeming factors about her is that she does not get tortured or induced. She gets turned actively and loses her soul. And then Logain releases the bond so that way he can survive having her killed in the battle. It's a whole thing. But yeah, she's one of the early ones to get turned, I think. Presumably because she's bonded to Logain. So to take Logain out, you get his Aes Sedai first.
Right.
But yeah, there's because of her participation, she gets thrown under the bus because politics. She gets birched publicly so that even the accepted can witness that Sisters 2 lay beneath the law, though they were not told what law. Interesting dynamic to have happen. There are laws you don't even know about. But here's a public expression of it.
I also like the way she fingers Elida in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I defend Elida a lot because she's got the Padden Fane influence and the Darkfriend influence, but Elida was never a good person.
No, she was beating accepted to make them quote unquote better at being Aes Sedai. She threw Tovaine under the bus for something they both believed in.
And she was involved in the vileness.
And what she believed in was the vileness.
Yeah.
She's been a pawn of the Black Ajah before. It's actually an old hat for her at this point to be a pawn of the Black Ajah.
Right. She's very good at it.
Mm-hmm. She's malleable to their interests.
Well, you make somebody hate enough and...
They are easily directed when their entire purpose is made of hate. Yep. And an interesting other part of Tovaine's backstory is that she's kind of a sexual predator. A little bit.
I missed that.
Yeah, she thinks about how she likes to sneak away and comfort herself with a pretty boy. And there's a line later on that Logain is not at all like the pretty boys Tovaine liked, eager and grateful and so easily controlled. And the wiki frames that as like boys. I don't know if that's actually from the companion or if that's just the way the wiki got written, but like she likes people she can control.
Yeah.
Like, and she uses the word boys and she's a Aes Sedai, and it's just like, ew.
What else happened to Owen? Ooh.
Yeah. Seriously. Or all the other pretty young, because they were looking for young men who are just manifesting the spark. They're all going to be, as young as 16. And if you're 100-year-old Aes Sedai there to carry out a slow death sentence, that is a very un-okay power imbalance for intimacy to occur in. I don't know. It's speculation, but she's canonically not a good person, and she likes pretty boys that are easily controlled. So
I'm not arguing with you at all. Yeah, that's, I think, a very gross thing to point out. It makes
I'm
me
sorry, I read the wiki. Because I hadn't quite put it all the way together, and the wiki said that, and I was like, ew. Now you brought Owen into it, which I hadn't thought of, so I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
Yeah. And who's to say Tovaine and Owen? Well, we don't know which Red was the one who gentled him.
No, we don't know if that's part of why Logain was so amenable to Swan's suggested lie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all of our bodies are doing the squeaky dance, Lillian in chat. I think you speak for all of us. Ugh.
You did warn us at the beginning of the chapter. You're like, there's a lot of things you have to say about the end of this chapter. So, yeah, there's going to be more of that, I'm sure, coming up.
It's such a bummer Morgan was not able to join us for this chapter. Fucking COVID took away someone to help us deal with this squick. Morgan's fine. She's just not feeling up to recording.
Yeah.
So
basically, Logain and company step out, shield everybody in the party. Tovaine panics and runs away. Oh, they'll lose the shield when they break sight. Like, no.
They know that that's not actually a barrier.
Yeah, these are pretty well trained by Logain and Taim, and
they've done Jemai's wells at this point.
Right. These are quality soldiers, and you've got no chance if that's the best you've got. Codswain may have had a chance with her Terangrial.
Sure. Yeah. And there's two other Aes Sedai with her here, Janare and Lamai. Lamai ends up getting bonded to so there's three Ashaman pointed out on the next page. Lamai ends up getting bonded to Hardlan, and Janare gets bonded to Kajima, and they all get turned/die. In the end. This is, I think, like the last time that we see them in a meaningful context. They just sort of show up, get bonded, and get dead because the last battle has a high body count. But yeah, she throws the guardsmen at the Ashaman, knowing full well they're going to die unarmored because who cares about men? And she gets scared when she hears that the Dragon Reborn is being invoked as a reason to not get killed. Keep them alive in the name of the Dragon Reborn. She thinks maybe the Dragon Reborn's here, and now she gets scared.
Right. Not when all the men were surrounding you. But I guess, yeah. It feels like Logain is mostly doing that just as justifying his own power, right? He's saying, oh, we are all doing this in the name of the Lord Draken, whereas he's the one commanding them.
And I think that that's not just to gain his own power with respect to Rand, but also to chip away at Taim's sense of overbearingness.
Good catch. Yes, absolutely.
The beginning of that power struggle, we're seeing it right here. Logain is claiming the authority of the Dragon Reborn, not the authority of the Mahale or whatever. But,
right. Not in the name of the Mahale, in the name of the Dragon Reborn.
And not in the name of himself even.
Right.
In the name of the dragon. But you're right, it is a power struggle move. It is a power move. I just think it's more against Taim than Rand.
Fair.
And then, she gets plucked off her horse And her horse gets to run away, unlike Fael's horse. This kind of scene reminds me of how Fael gets captured, where she's running away in the snow on her horse. But in Fael's case, her horse breaks a leg and gets hit with an arrow and dies. And in this case, the horse gets to run away and hopefully chill.
Oh, man. I'd be curious on the horse body count in this series.
Ooh. Does the horse die? Yes.
Yeah.
So many horses die.
Yeah. You know, that's one of the reasons we fall in love with Bella is because she, is the one horse that, we continue to see throughout the entire series from the beginning.
She might have been the first death that actually made me sit down and cry when I was listening to the book the first time. Because
we've got, Pips and Stepper and Tie-Dye Shar, there's a few other horses, but they're more
Aldib and Mandarb.
Yeah, they do come pretty damn close. You're right.
Particularly Mandarb. Aldib kind of pieces out Fires of Heaven.
Yeah, I'm going to say, whatever happens to Aldib,
I think she just gets to retire to the Kyrian countryside.
I got to look this up.
I'm going to headcanon.
This is really important to me right now.
What happens to Aldib? Mandarb makes it through to the end, though.
Following Moraine's disappearance and presumed death, she was stabled indefinitely at the Sun Palace.
Yeah, so I had canon that she was not put back into use. She was just put out to pasture to hang out until Moraine came back for her in the Fourth Age.
Yep, that makes sense. Moraine would then reclaim her after her Gandalf moment.
Right, yeah, eventually she's going to be like, what happened to my horse? And then someone's going to be like, you mean the really awesome white horse that nobody will mess with because the Dragon Reborn cried every time he looked at it? Yeah, the other Ashaman here, Norley, that gets mentioned, does also bond another Red Sister. It's just not one that gets named. All the Ashaman and Aes Sedai who are in the quaternary category here, they all get turned.
Wow, that's impressive. That's just Sanderson taking the fucking hacksaw.
Yeah.
It's rough. Named characters. I imagine him with a scythe in a field just mowing down.
Just Grim Reapering his way through the thing. Yeah, absolutely.
He's like, we gotta get rid of those Ashaman. Gotta get rid of those Aes Sedai.
I gotta prune this plot up. Jesus. So Tovaine gets to look at the Ashaman who has captured her. He sort of floats her down out of the air and sits her in front of his horse. And she thinks about it for a minute and then decides to have a complete panic attack, screaming and kicking and having one tiny part of her mind slightly logical and the rest of her totally melting down. Basically 9-year-old me if there was a spider. Is basically what she's doing. Kicking everyone in the head, knocking over drinks, upending the couch. This is how I responded to spiders until I very specifically worked on it. That's how she's responding to the Ashaman here.
There's a phobia there.
Yes, an irrational phobia where you are 3 moves into setting everything on fire before your conscious brain has caught up with your actions. And in fairness, she is being abducted by the literal bogeyman. I mean, she's allowed to have a bit of a freak out in this moment. From where she's sitting, this is the actual devil coming out of a cloud of smoke and grabbing her. I would also be upset if I believed that people who can channel are oozing evil.
It's fair. And so then he initiates a weave with a gesture, which is how I'm going to approach this scene, which is something that we see frequently where gestures are, in fact, tied to weaves because that's how the people learn it. Mm-hmm. And so I see why it's in there, that because this weave is meant for wives. Now we can get into what that means in a second. But because it's meant for wives, it's sort of a proposal, hey, will you be my wife so I can keep track of you?
Yeah, then will you kiss the bride?
And you kiss the bride, and then yes.
Magic.
Right.
And I like that he apologizes. He's like, I'm sorry, this is how I learned the weave. We didn't think about using this on not wives, so this is going to be awkward. I appreciate that he treats it as a mechanic rather than as a moment to be James Bond. However, the following paragraph...
Would you care to read that or not?
No. I am not reading Robert Jordan badly describing an orgasm to represent magical mind rape. I do not like him phrasing this as sexual and satisfying. It's very uncomfortable and not necessary. That's not how getting bonded is described when a man gets bonded.
Nope.
At all.
Nope.
We see Rand getting bonded, and he does not indicate anything like this is happening for him.
And one of the things I think we really have to talk about it is because it's the freaking chapter title, right? He says, I could have done without the extra bit, he sighed. This is what he's referring to.
I could have done without making you come from mind raping you.
Right.
Like, what?
And I got to agree here. I could have done without the extra bit.
I am with Logain.
Yeah.
We could all have done without the extra bit.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm like, okay, Jordan, I can see. Okay. You called yourself out there. You played yourself. Like.
And then we can get into. Yet I suppose it's necessary. You're hardly a wife. What? The actual fuck?
Yeah.
Did you just say women need to be magically controlled in order to be wives, my friend? You didn't just say that, did you? I don't like it's necessary. Is he? I mean, I guess he's saying it's necessary for self-defense, but he's also implying that every other wife has mind control in the name of her safety? What?
I'm just going to say it mirrors the border bond in a very realistic way. Control is part of that border bond. And the only reason Rand is not under the control of a certain...
Alana?
Name of Alana. I don't know why I want to call her Banana, but...
Because she makes a fruit. Because Alana is fruit.
I don't know why. Isn't she Yellow Ajah too?
No, she's green.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, she'll...
Bananas are green.
Give her a couple of days. She'll turn into a yellow.
And then she'll become a brown. And then she'll become black.
The natural progression through the Ajahs is just follow the banana.
Apparently, Alana Banana rhymes in Aussie, according to chat.
And, you know, before they're green, aren't they like white on the vine as little berries?
I've only watched one cool video about banana processing, and it didn't really start with the fruit. I don't know. Maybe. Alana Banana.
And I've definitely seen red bananas, so I can definitely see that. That's like when they go off on a weird tangent.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, guys.
So it is very defensive in Logain's case to want to have a red sister under control. Okay, so but before we got off on Alana, you were saying that the only reason that Rand is not controlled by Alana with the Warder Bond is because...
He can channel.
So is Tovaine not a red sister who can channel?
Well, as we see with circles and bonding, right? Jordan very much puts one person in control over the other when that bond comes together. So, like, if you like when a man and woman are in a circle together, I think the man has control, which is why like Grendel and Samael will never bond, and so he's just using that dynamic, basically to say, oh, they're in a bond, it's a one-way bond, and the man has control.
I don't that because I don't like that the gender of the person being force bonded changes how much mind control the bonder has.
I feel like he's trying to make an analogy with strength.
If it's because Rand is so much stronger than Alana and Tovaine is presumably less strong than Logain, I could buy that. I could buy it as a matter of sheer strength.
Because he's just trying to, I think, equivalate physical strength with strength of the power. And when you have two people in a relationship, you know, the relative strength of those people matters. If they're trying to abuse, you know, like... Right,
and we don't get a chance to see that dynamic play out with Pevara and Andrel because of the double bonding happening instantly.
Right.
So we don't get... Because presumably Andrel would be controllable in that relationship, except for the part where he double bonds back.
And I do want to make it, you know, they are mirror images of each other, but they are not in absolutely exactly the same thing, right? These bonds work in different ways.
The border bond and the wife bond?
The border bond and the wife bond, yeah. We'll call them that. Like, they are definitely different kinds of bonds. They have a lot of similarities, but in the same way that I think he's making this analogy of, like, you know, male and female have mirror images, but they're not always exactly opposite, equal and opposite.
What are the differences between the bonds?
They all have that I keep being like, no.
I think they actually are the same.
They both let you see where the other person is. They both let you know how they're feeling. They both have an aspect of control.
They both have an aspect of physical and emotional.
I feel like it's more one way where the male gets to see what's on the woman's mind and not the other way around. But you can, shut yourself off from your warder in the same way.
Yeah, I guess we don't ever get a sense of what it's like for the non-channeling wives.
Right.
We know what it's like for Tovaine, and I think, and Pevara, but she's different. So we know what it's like for Tovaine, but we don't know what it's like for a non-channeler, so we don't know if the non-channeling wives if their experience is like the worst. Are they super strong now? Are all of the wives, do they have warder strength and stamina and stuff? Are they keeping up with those toddlers like fucking bosses?
That's one way to give your wife more energy instead of doing the dishes and the laundry. You can just give her some magical power.
I mean, they could be an elite defensive force for the Black Tower Nursery, that we never get a sense. I would we don't see it with Tovaine, but I would like to believe that the non-channeling wives get warder souped up because of this bond. Because you're right, the amount of control that is being exerted on Tovaine here is no worse than the amount of control being exerted on any warder who was bonded without consent. It's the same. Mm-hmm. The kissing part, because of the marriage thing, seems like an unnecessary detail. But it is equally vile. It's not more vile. It's only equally vile.
And in a lot of ways, the warder bond has become a little more civil just in the way that they are traditionally using it. They're not using some of its more vile aspects on a regular basis. But we see with Lan and Myrelle that it's certainly possible to use them in those ways when she compels them to come to her.
Yeah, and there's also an element of maybe this is part of how the warder bond was first worked out with Aes Sedai and how they came up with customs around it and how to use it. This is, in a sense, just the Ashaman going through the same growing pains as the Aes Sedai would have when they first discovered it. And obviously they're doing it in the shadow of a much bigger war than the Aes Sedai way back when. But it's, I don't like that part of the warder bond. I wish that, because we see Moiraine and Lan being so healthy about it,
right
at first, it's easy to forget that this extremely toxic element of that relationship is always there, and it's simply a matter of choice whether or not the Aes Sedai uses it, and that's gross.
But if you want to bring it back to a real world analogy, right, marriage does have this sort of forced bonding, especially back in the day when marriages was when divorce was harder to get. It does have a way of forcing you to act in a certain way with a certain person. There's force of law behind that, especially back in the day,
Yeah. You can't get a bank account without your husband's say-so.
Right.
And if you're a single woman, I guess you don't get a bank account. Yeah. No, that's true. The institution of marriage as a weaponized form of control is very much the legacy of marriage, even if it's not my personal experience of it.
Right, and I think that the courts have changed, and that's part of hopefully what the women's rights movement did was.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to say that it's not necessarily an unnecessary detail by Jordan to include that. He is making room for there to be commentary on real world institutions that bond people into shitty power dynamics, because that is what it takes to have survival. Yeah, I still don't like it, but now I can appreciate its inclusion maybe at a better level, which is good.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about with these bonds is, the White Tower is something of a church, right? So these are high members of the church, there's a certain amount of social expectations there.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And then, Logain uses his powers of control to be like, you will not assassinate me in my sleep, which, given his history, I understand him using mind control to protect against Red Sisters.
Given her history.
Yeah, given the two. Yeah, okay, fine. I'll give that a pass. That's legitimate use of mind control.
There is this saying where the boy says, the Mahale won't like you taking a second warder. I don't think he's just taking any at all. And yet later he tells Rand, oh yeah, it was the Mahale's idea. And I'm trying to wonder, do you think he's just conveniently lying.
I think the Mahale likes it when his favored ones get to have a carefully controlled portion of the booty from his hand. The spoils of war come from the war leader. You don't get to take your own. That's the kind of guy Taim is, I think. He doesn't want people having agency and doing what they want, but he's willing to give them a share from the bounty because he's so generous. I'm guessing that's what's going on there.
And if you want to know, that's in Crossroads of Twilight, chapter 24. Logain reports that it was Taim's order. I never going to assume that meant the order came from Rand. And so there's another reason why he's saying, in the name of the Dragon Reborn.
Which I don't think he's doing anything other than exercising his association with Rand. I don't think he's actually working on orders of the Dragon Reborn.
No, but he certainly says he is.
Yeah. And I mean, in spirit, he is. Take them alive in the orders of the Dragon Reborn. That's not out of line with Rand's ethos around Eyes to Die.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, he would definitely not want to kill them.
And this one, Vinchova, this pretty boy here, he is also turned and killed like all the other Ashaman that we've mentioned so far. But he is one of the guys who makes a special effort to protect the Two Rivers recruits before that happens. He is one of the third in command good guys in Logain's little rebellion that goes through the thing and gets captured and turned in the course of that. But he does a bunch of cool stuff in terms of trying to protect the Two Rivers kids before it all goes to hell. So, pour one out for Vinchova.
And I think that just leads to the readout.
Yeah. Basically, Tovaine is blown away to realize that it's Logain and is then depressed to learn about what he's done to her.
She's like, Elida will pay for this if Logain ever lets me.
Which is, oof, that's a bitter thought.
Yeah.
However much he heard, the pretty boy laughed with incredulous disbelief. Tovaine barely heard him. She was gazing up at the man looming over her. Logain, the false dragon. But he was dead, stilled and dead, and holding her before his saddle with a casual hand. Why was she not screaming or striking at him? Even her belt knife would do, this near. Yet she had no desire at all to reach for the ivory haft. She could, she realized. That band around her middle was gone. She could at least slip down off the horse and try to... She had no desire to do that either. What did you do to me? She demanded, calmly. At least she had managed to hold on to that. Turning his horse to ride back to the road, Logain told her what he had done, and she put her head against that wide chest, not caring at all how big he was, and wept. She was going to make Elida pay for this, she vowed. If Logain ever let her, she would. That last was an especially bitter thought. She doesn't get to pay Elida back.
No.
Not because Logain denies her, but just because the world falls apart before she has a chance to ask.
Yeah, that does happen real fast.
Real fast. Real fast.
We've been planning out the next 2 books worth of episodes, just in terms of timing and combining and doing a little bit of looking into that as we come up on the end of this one. And it's been interesting to see, again, just how fast time passes and then how much it overlaps.
It's going to take us years to get weeks further down this timeline.
Yes, it will. And I do have to apologize. I am absolutely consumed by this new day job. It is a lot for me to adjust to, and it's taking up a lot of my attention and time. So if I'm a little out of it, or if I don't get back to you on a very good consistency, I really have to apologize. I'm doing my best, but there's just a lot going on. in my life and job right now. So hopefully I can keep up, but I really do apologize ahead of time for this one.
Well, it's I'm sure I speak for all of us when we say it's just get through this. It's gonna be okay, but you have to just survive getting through it. And we're fine. We're fine. The podcast is simmering along fine. You got a great understudy in just in time. And I've got this on lock. I got this. The
great thing is all I have to do is show up and talk about Wheel of Time. And Aradia is absolutely carrying the rest of the load. And it's just been amazing to have her step up and do that. So thank you, Aradia.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to distract myself from the shit I need to actually be doing by playing with Wheel of Time, Tetris. It's a delight. I love doing this podcast. I love editing it. And I mostly love publishing it. Sometimes it gets a little tedious, but mostly I love it. Finding the art is one of my favorite parts, but no, seriously, it's great. I love being part of this podcast. I love that I get to make it happen because it was definitely one of those podcasts that I found and was like, this is the podcast I should be making. And now, 4 years later, 3.5, 4 years later, here I am making said podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?